Be sitting in that it shows one picture
I was running over.
close, and then it shows another picture where it's sitting.
Terry.
Well, you mentioned
Thank
that
you.
you might consider breeding the dog.
As far as I know.
I was here earlier. I wanted to sit again. You got meetings?
Good afternoon, everyone. I am opening the APCD meeting for March 15th. Could I have a roll call, please?
Directors Williams? Wolf? Adam? Hartman? Here. Lavanino? Richardson?
Here.
Mosby?
Here.
Bennett?
Here.
Clark?
Here.
Murillo?
Here.
Waterfield? Andrzejczyk?
Here.
And Vice Chair Lazaldi.
Here. Could you please join me in the pledge, please? Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item number 3, closed session. Staff?
Closed session, C1, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, Government Code 54956.9D2, one potential case.
Okay, we will adjourn to closed session and then return. Okay. Item 4, report from closed session. Mr. Drill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The board took no action in closed session that requires a report. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, item 5, approval of the minutes.
Item 5, approval of minutes. Approve minutes of the January 18th, 2018 meeting.
Okay. Can I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Directors Williams? Aye. Hartman?
Aye.
Richardson?
Aye.
Mosby?
Aye.
Bennett?
Aye.
Clark?
Aye.
Murillo?
Abstain. I wasn't here.
Waterfield? Abstain. Andrusik?
Abstain.
And Vice Chair Lizaldi.
Aye.
Motion passes 703.
Moving on to item number 6, administrative items. Approved by one motion. These items read only on request of board members. Okay, are any, would you like to read?
If any needs to be pulled, we'll
Yeah,
read them.
is there any one that would like to pull an item? Mr. Clark, would you like to pull any items?
Thanks for asking, but no.
Do I hear a motion to approve administrative items?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Directors Williams? Aye. Hartman? Aye. Richardson?
Aye.
Mosby?
Aye.
Bennett?
Aye.
Clark?
Aye.
Murillo?
Aye.
Waterfield? Aye. Andrusik?
Aye.
And Vice Chair Lizaldi.
Aye.
Motion passes 10-0.
Okay. Moving on to public comment. Do we have any public comment slip?
I have no speaker slips.
No speaker slips. Santa Barbara, no speaker slips.
No, sir.
Okay. Number 8, director's report.
All right, good afternoon. I have a few items to report on, 3 actually. The first one, I put a flyer, hopefully you all have a copy. It's a one-page summary of a new piece of legislation that passed in 2017. Cristina Garcia was successful in getting a community air protection program passed. If you don't have a copy, we have another one here. All right. ARB is the agency that is responsible for implementing this statewide program to reduce exposure in communities that are most impacted by air pollution. And a lot of this focus is on disadvantaged communities, environmental justice communities throughout the state. And it really is focused on a lot of public engagement, trying to make sure that we as air districts in the state are reaching out to these communities and getting a better handle of the amount of emissions that they're exposed to and ways to reduce their exposure. There's some key elements. As I mentioned, they are going to be focusing first, for the first year, on the most heavily impacted communities. Santa Barbara County will not likely have a community identified that meets the ranking. They're thinking only a handful, maybe 6 or 10 is what I've heard. Once they have the identification of those communities, they're going to require a community-wide monitoring program be implemented, as well as an emission reduction program for those handful communities. We're using screening tools like CalEnviroScreen. You can use all sorts of low-income maps or information that's available to better characterize your community, and this is something that our staff, my staff, are looking at currently to assess the most impacted regions of Santa Barbara County. In addition to the identification of communities, there's also an incentive program that's provided. There's been an accompanying bill, AB 134, that allocated $250 million through incentive programs. I get a little bit of feedback, but okay. Can you hear me, Al?
I sure can. Thanks, Aaron.
Okay. So with the incentive grant funding, it will be following the same type of projects that we fund through our Carl Moyer program, primarily replacing diesel engines.
Mr. Clark, could you turn your microphone up? Mr. Clark, could you turn your microphone off, please?
All right, we'll see if that works.
Thank you.
Thank you. So of the $250 million that's provided for implementation of incentive programs identified in this project, 95% of those funds are going to the large districts, the 3 large districts, Santa Barbara, or not Santa Barbara, I was wishful thinking there, South Coast, the Bay Area, and San Joaquin Valley. Those are the regions most impacted by high amounts of air toxin and pollution. The remaining 5%, $12.5 million, will be allocated to small and medium-sized districts. Santa Barbara has been earmarked $650,000 for the first year of funding to replace out diesel engines for cleaner burning technologies. We will be coming back to your board at the June meeting. In addition to the incentive programs, we are also working on the state emission reporting project, making sure that all the emission inventory that we compile here is forwarded up to the state. That's an additional requirement, as well as an accelerated retrofit of air pollution controls for polluting industries. The state has earmarked, in addition to the incentive program of $650,000, they've also awarded $74,000 to our district for the staff time needed to implement these new requirements. And we need to come back to your board in June and identify projects that we could likely fund with those funds, as well as get authorization to receive the additional money. I just wanted to give you a heads up because currently we're about to launch community outreach projects in those most disadvantaged in Santa Barbara County. So more coming on that front. The second item, last week on Wednesday, March the 7th, we participated in a community meeting that was hosted by the City of Goleta. It was on the H2S odors that we've been receiving complaints on over the most recently, the last 2 years. Caitlin McNally, the APCD's Manager of Compliance Division, presented for the APCD along with the Office of Emergency Management, County Fire, Santa Barbara County Environmental Health, and Public Health. We all discussed our roles and responsibilities, the tools that we have to investigate and determine where the H2S odor is coming from, and we answered a lot of questions as far as what can be done to resolve the impacts from H2S. I think it was a good demonstration of agencies coming together. This is not the first time. We actually participated in a city council meeting last year, I believe, on the same issue. We don't have a silver bullet for this one yet. It's still a very challenging situation as far as trying to get a handle on the source and implementing measures to reduce it. But we're committed to continuing work with the other agencies and expanding the amount and types of agencies involved to ensure that we have some sort of solution to reduce the impacts from the H2S odors.
Mr. Chair.
The meeting was televised, and it's available on our website and on the City of Goleta's website.
Well, just a comment about the Garcia bill and your looking at implementation here. You know, CalEnviroScreen is a great tool in some ways, but its weaknesses are particularly weak in our setting because it does not do a very good job of recognizing poverty and amid affluence. You know, Exhibit A. If you use CalEnviroScreen, West Oakland, right next to the biggest source of pollutants in the state, the Port of Oakland, is not a disadvantaged community, for example. In fact, if you use CalEnviroScreen, almost all disadvantaged communities are in Los Angeles County and some along the 99 corridor. So it's particularly weak at recognizing disadvantaged communities in rural communities like our own. And where there's poverty amid affluence. So I would just lobby to pay particular attention to low-income communities that are adjacent to our major freeway, the 101 here. There's a pretty good county public health documentation on the impacts, disproportionate impacts of air pollutants for residents within 200 feet. I forget the exact measurement that they used of the freeway. So that particularly impacts residents of the Lower East Side and Lower West Side of Santa Barbara, but that's not the only place in the county I would look.
Yeah, and I appreciate your comments on CalEnviroScreen. We've been actually in conversations with OEHA and ARB as far as how that tool doesn't fit every district. There's many districts that are facing the same challenge, and this bill doesn't rely solely on the CalEnviroScreen. We're able to look at our own local information and other mapping resources and census information that we have and able to make that determination. So we're definitely going to go well beyond CalEnviroScreen.
Great.
Director Hartman?
Thank you. I wanted to go back to the hydrogen sulfide meeting. I did hear from a number of people that it was much appreciated and the different agencies coming together and wrestling with this. So I thank you for your role in that. And as I understand it, this largely is coming from agricultural wells. We have limited authority. I guess my real question is, where do we go next, and are there any incentives? I mean, is it coming from overhead irrigation? Could we encourage and incentivize drip irrigation, or where do we go now?
You highlight a really important avenue we need to go down is working with the agricultural community and the Ag Commissioner's office. It was unfortunate it didn't work for them as far as attendance at the meeting, and their interaction with the local farmers is much more direct than what the Air Pollution Control District has historically held with those entities. We have no regulation with the ag community, nor do we have regulatory oversight with those sources. So, and we don't know best practices. So that's where we need to expand our net and work cooperatively with the Ag Commission and the ag community.
And the Resource Conservation District perhaps as well.
That's a good point, and we'll be able to talk tomorrow in regards, I'm attending another meeting with the Resource Conservation Districts where that conversation can happen. The rule we have an H2S rule that is based on being off-site of any source, regardless of the source, at a certain concentration. It's Rule 310. And it did come into play where we had regulatory authority from the drilling activity that occurred, I think it was 2 years ago when we had that deep well that was drilled and it just blanketed Goleta and H2S. That one we were able to get out there and use the resources that were at the Veneco fence line monitoring station, as well as the Cal-OSHA H2S monitors that the drillers themselves had on their bodies when they were at the site. And we have a Jerome, a handheld device where we're able to get out and do it. But with H2S, you know, our nose is very unique, and everyone has a different meter and sensitivity to H2S odors. And a lot of times when we get these odor complaints, if it's not during our business hours, we're not an emergency response agency, so we do rely heavily on the fire agency to get out and take the readings. They also, thanks to the city of Goleta, have their own Jerome handheld device. But even if they're out and responding to complaints when they're happening, the levels are very low, well below what we have in our Rule 310. So we really need to go down the path of being a good neighbor and taking a look at meteorological conditions, different types of irrigation perhaps, and bringing in all the entities that are necessary to find the solutions.
So we're not yet sure about next steps and who's responsible, who's taking the lead.
We all took, you know, after the big impact from the drilling well, we got together and did an after-action report. OEM was involved in that, the City of Goleta, APCD, and Environmental Health. We're going to continue getting together. I was talking with Michelle Green just last week, and we just need to call folks and get together and continue this effort and expand the net to include agricultural representation as well.
Okay, I'd love to be on the emails or just to know what's happening.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Director Bennett?
Yeah, I attended the meeting and just wanted to mention we do not hold the Jerome detector. We bought it and gave it to County Fire. So it's in the possession of County Fire for their use because they are an emergency response agency 24/7. So anytime a call comes in, they'll go and they'll be able to register. And one of the challenges has been because it's been at such a low level. But as we learned, there are residents that have been affected even though it's been at such a low level that they've actually felt symptoms as a result of this, which is really impacting. I requested, and I've been assured that this will occur, that we have 2 others participate that have not been participating up to now. We've heard that the Agriculture Commissioner's Office is going to be included in that, and I asked for that. And I also asked for Goleta Water to be a part of it. Was suggestions from members of the community that we should set up this line of monitors, et cetera, et cetera. But that doesn't solve the problem. All that does is tell you, yeah, which our noses can tell us, we have the smell of rotten eggs. We don't need monitors to tell us that. And because all these that have been detected have been at the very lowest of thresholds, we need to solve the problem of what we're experiencing. I went on to point out that I'm familiar with the problem in my previous occupation, and we dealt with that going back that I can recall in the 80s. And so it's an issue, interestingly, that's clearly agricultural related, and we need the cooperation of the farming community. We need the cooperation of Goleta Water, because Goleta Water does supply water out on the west end. And I just said it was my speculation. I'm saying it here today. It's speculation on my part that it may very well be the reason we've more recently been impacted is because they're going back to using well water as opposed to using Goleta water. And one of the impacts of Goleta water is that they raise the agricultural rates, and they've been raised in the agricultural community's mind substantially. And as a result, I'm speculating that maybe they're using back to the old levels of well water that they weren't using previously. So, and again, that's just my speculation. So I've requested that we, do further investigation, make contact with the agricultural community, and see if we can't work collaboratively together to come up with a means to solving the problem. And of course, it's simple to say to just use Goleta water because you don't have that impact, but that's an impact on the farming community. And so we just need to address all this. And up to now, the Agricultural Commissioner's Office or Goleta Water has not been a part of that participation. So that was my request, and that's why.
All right, I have one last item, and it'll be a quick one. I just wanted to recognize 2 positions at the district that have recently been filled. First, I would like to recognize Molly Pearson, who is now on my management team. Ms. Pearson was recently promoted to the manager of the Technology and Environmental Assessment Division. This is a position that Ben formerly held. So I wanted to recognize Molly. Unfortunately, she is not able to be here today at the meeting to be recognized in person. And then just this Monday, Jim Fredrickson has become our planning and grant supervisor. So Jim is here. You might have been working with Jim in the past. He's been the one primary staff involved with our grants program. So he is very well suited to pick up the leadership reins and supervise that effort as well. So please join me in congratulating both Molly and Jim in their leadership roles. That concludes my report.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for such a report that's well done, so informative. Moving on to item number 9, discussion items. Number 1.
Item 1, Santa Barbara County Education Office Education Celebration Event. Receive and file information about the Santa Barbara County Education Office Education Celebration Event on May 24th, 2018 to recognize teachers selected for various environmental education grants, including Care for Our Earth grants.
Liz Hoffman, the Air Pollution Control District Public Information Officer, will present this afternoon on a continuing partnership with local schools and teachers to expand awareness on air quality.
So tech savvy is not in my job description. I don't know how to get it on the screen. Thank you, Terry.
Make sure your mic's on too.
You guys hear me okay? Okay. Good afternoon, Chair Lizalde and board members. So I'm going to talk a little bit, like Erin said, about our teacher grants program. So as you may know, we've had a long-standing relationship with the County Education Office, and together with the County Water Agency and utility companies, for many years we have provided $300 mini grants to K-12 teachers in the county under our Care for Our Earth teacher grants program. This year, the money that we contributed is also going toward some more in-depth classroom projects, which I'll touch on in the next couple of slides. So every year, the application for the Care for Our Earth grants goes out in the fall, and we do outreach with our partners in this program the whole year. This year, we're going to be funding 27 projects at 26 different schools across the county. These grants are great, not just because they support our mission, but because they teach the kids a lot about science and the environment. And the schools really like them too because they benefit. They get reduced traffic, cheaper utility bills, things of that nature. These pictures here, these are some photos of classrooms whose teachers previously were awarded the grants. So I'd like to share with you some examples of this year's grants. Again, the $4,300 that we contributed this year went into a big pot with all the money that all the partners contributed to fund these various grants. So just providing a little snapshot of some of the Care for Our Earth grants that we are awarding this year. You have a full list attached to your board letter. So Jean Gradius from Cold Spring School in Montecito is going to be working with her students to link the school weather station to Weather Underground. And then they're also going to be using Raspberry Pi, which is a computer that teaches kids how to code. They're going to use that to help regulate the temperatures in their school greenhouse. Sounds pretty cool. We have several teachers who are going to be working with their students on composting projects at school. So you can see Jessica French from Rice Elementary School in Santa Maria, Carlos Gonzalez from Oak Valley Elementary School in Buellton, and Misha Lewis, also from Cold Spring School in Montecito. And like I said, the full list is attached to your board letter. Moving on, so a curriculum project grant we're also helping fund this year. This was originally a proposal for a Care for Our Earth grant, and the teacher was able to expand it into a bigger project. So it's two-pronged, her project. One prong is the students are going to be learning how to build circuits, and they're going to build these circuits to make art projects. So one of those projects is that they're going to build circuits to help light up a greeting card. Sounds pretty cute. They're also going to be using circuits to make an artful demonstration of what the lights look like in their house, where they're turned on and where they're turned off. The second prong of her project is to build solar-powered ovens with her students, and they're going to use recycled pizza boxes and aluminum foil to do that. I don't know what they're baking, but I'm sure it'll be really fun for them. Moving on to a team coaching grant. Your board heard a little bit about this at the January meeting. Ricardo Magni, who is a teacher at Pioneer Valley High School in Santa Maria, is going to be coaching 4 other teachers in the county on how to best use handheld air sensors, which you heard about at your last meeting. All of these teachers, Care for Earth grant teachers, curriculum project grant teachers, and the team coaching grant teachers are going to be recognized at the Education Celebration event in May 24th. All of you, of course, are invited to attend if you want to help congratulate the teachers. And if any one of you would like to attend to represent the district, please let us know. Have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions? Thank you. Thank you. This is report and receive?
Yeah,
Yes.
receive and file.
Okay.
But I do encourage, if anyone is interested from our board to participating, I know Janet Wolf has been at the reception for us, and did Holly, Mayor Serna, get to go?
You know, I didn't attend last year, so I don't recall who our district representative was. But
Yeah. So if it is an opportunity, if you'd like to participate, we are looking for an APCD board member. So keep that in your mind if you're available for May
24th.
24th. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, item number 2.
Item 2, results from 2017 Vessel Speed Reduction Incentive Program. Receive and file and an update on the 2017 Vessel Speed Reduction Incentive Program.
Next up, Mary Bird, Community Program Supervisor, will share results from the 2017 Vessel Speed Reduction Program and the successful ceremony that was held a few weeks back at the Port of Long Beach in LA to recognize the participating companies.
Yes, good afternoon, Chair Lizalde, members of the board. I'm here to report on the results from our 2017 Vessel Speed Reduction Incentive Program. We also refer to it as Protecting Blue Whales and Blue Skies because we are working on the common goal of slowing ships down to cut air pollution and protect whales. So this is a picture of representatives from 10 of the 11 shipping companies that participated in our program. They attended the event March 1st near the Port of Los Angeles. Last year we had the event in our county, but we decided that the whole point was to recognize the shipping companies. So we needed to go where they could easily send their reps. So you see them here with their plaques and certificates. Also in attendance at that event were the directors of all 3 air districts, ours, the Ventura Air District, and the Bay Area Air District. We also had the executive director of CAPCOA, the California Air Pollution Control Officers Association. We had the head of the Western Region Office of NOAA's National Marine Sanctuaries. We had the heads of the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation and the Volcano Foundation. We had representatives from the ports of LA and Long Beach, San Diego Port, and Port Hueneme, as well as other shipping industry representatives, staff from several congressional offices, and U.S. Congressman Alan Lowenthal. So these are the shipping lines that participated. They're some of the largest container shipping companies in the world. We had a couple of new participants this year, and I will talk about that too. For the first time this year, our program was extended to the San Francisco Bay Area. So here you see on the left is the zones in the channel shipping lanes and also a route outside the islands. And then you see the 3 approaches to the San Francisco Bay. So these were our speed reduction zones. So the funding is provided by the 3 air districts and the 2 foundations. And we use that funding for incentives and administrative costs. Then we also have a cost with doing the emission calculations both for the speed reduction zones, and this year for the first time, we wanted to study what happened in between the zones. So if the transit was participating in both zones, both regions, we wanted to look at historical baseline and see, okay, what are they doing in between? Are they speeding up to make up for lost time since they're slowing down in both other regions? What are we going to find? I will tell you. Okay, so the structure of it this year was a $1,000 incentive for slowing to 12 knots or less, with an additional $250 bonus for going down to 10 knots in each region. So if they slowed down in both regions and got the bonus, that was the max that they could get. We had good numbers this year. We had several shipping lines enrolled, a lot of transit applications received. We enrolled 143 total transits, and actually more than 60% slowed down to 10 knots or less. So we offer that bonus because we get continuing emission reduction benefits between 12 and 10, and there's increased whale protection benefits as well. So the program overall reduced 83.5 tons of smog-forming NOx and more than 2,600 metric tons of greenhouse gases. Most of these reductions were achieved in our region because of the greater length of our zone. Our channel zone is 100 nautical miles, and the Bay Area ones are much smaller. So if we look just at the incentives and the admin costs and the costs of the calculations, it's a cost effectiveness of approximately 3,000 per ton of NOx reduced. However, it was a complicated program this year, so the staff time was considerable, and I'm not including that in this assessment here. So I mentioned that we had the opportunity for the first time to look at what happened between the zones. We got the historical baseline speed averages for all the transits that participated in both vessel speed reduction zones. So what we found, we had asked the companies to try not to speed up in between the regions. We were not incentivizing that region, so we weren't saying slow down to 12, but try not to speed up over what you've done before. And so there were 68 transits that included both regions, and we were quite surprised by the results. We found that more than 60% actually slowed down as compared with their historical baseline. That doesn't mean they were going to 10 or 12. They were just slower than what they had done before in that area. And then another 15% did not speed up. They were going basically what they had done before. So that's a 75% did not speed up. That's an exciting finding for us because it's telling us we're not producing unintended consequences, which is very, very good for us. So this is our third year. We did a program in 2014, 2016, and then 2017. This year we tripled the transits and we tripled the emission reductions. So extending to the Bay Area was part of that, and also just having more to do with what we had in terms of funding. So now, one thing we really wanted to do more of, and your board has provided input on that in the past, is build this recognition so that it's really meaningful for the shipping companies. It's always been a very meaningful part of the program, and this year was particularly so with all the ports representatives and all the people that came to this event. And so we had, you know, a lot of interest, and we gave them each pictures of their reps with the key partners in the program. So they not only got a plaque and a certificate and a congratulations, they got this picture to take back to their corporate offices. Here is an example of the two companies that were able to deliver on every single transit they said they were going to slow down on. So not every company can deliver when they say they're going to try to slow down. There's all kinds of issues, scheduling issues, port berthing issues, weather, you know, there's all kinds of things that can get in their way. And oftentimes they will email us and say, hey, you know, there's just no way I can slow this one down. I was trying. Or I can get it to 12, but I won't make it to 10. So these two companies actually had a 100% success rate. So we called this out at the event. This was a new participant for the first time. What was impressive that we called out with them was that they were providing voluntary whale sightings reports from their crews. So that was a little above and beyond. So these are just some examples of the things we were calling out. So the takeaways from this year's program, we felt the expansion was successful, and we were able to do the emission calculations as we had done them before, but in a larger program that is very challenging. And it was somewhat challenging this year. It was a more complicated program. If we look ahead and how we could grow and what we would do in a bigger program, we might not be able to deliver exactly that level of specificity with the emission reductions. Because right now we're actually looking at this engine on this vessel and comparing it at this speed versus this speed. So it's very, very specific and very, very concrete. If we grow the program into a bigger program, we're going to have to start talking about fleet averages and generically emission reductions, not so much tied to each vessel. So again, I mentioned this. This is a very important takeaway. We were not producing unintended consequences. So there's some feeling that we have that this is getting cooperation from the shipping industry. The recognition continues to be very meaningful. And the Blue Whales and Blue Skies Act that Congressman Lowenthal introduced in September last year is all about recognition. It's about creating a federal recognition program for shipping companies that voluntarily slow down in the Channel region and ultimately extending that to a greater area. So at this point, we are still discussing what our next steps are, so I don't have any next steps to report to you. But we are having a lot of interesting and stimulating discussions. So I will leave you with a picture of two blue whales in the Santa Barbara Channel. This is an aerial survey that NOAA did. These are on the north coast of the Santa Cruz Island and very close to the southbound shipping lane. So it's a very real issue that we're addressing, both in terms of pollution and in terms of whales. Any questions?
Any questions? First off, Mary, I want to congratulate you on the effort you've done to particularly save the whales. I think that's a vital part of this overall thing, and plus the slowdown. But my question is the $3,000 per ton of NOx, how does that compare with other incentive programs? Is that in the ballpark? Is that a better deal, or what?
Well, it's never going to be apples and apples because we're talking about offshore reductions. If we're comparing it with onshore, obviously you want to get those onshore reductions because that's really the highest impact that you're getting from the pollution. So in our Moyer programs, I believe the cost effectiveness number is going to be at 30,000, but that's a weighted multi-pollutant type of measure. So it's not really going to be apples to apples. It's a great number, but again, it doesn't include staff time, and it doesn't, reflect that offshore onshore issue.
So it's a real benefit then, because of the cost per ton.
In terms of cost per ton, it's a very attractive number. Yes. And one reason I brought up that if the program grows to a bigger program, it will be harder to have numbers that detailed and specific, because we are very confident. We have experts doing these emission calculations that do them for the ports around the world for vessel speed reduction programs specifically. So they have the engine information, they have the vessel information, and those are real numbers. But when you get to a bigger program, it just becomes totally unwieldy. Plus, the shipping industry is changing so much that the vessel name might be different. It might never have traveled in our region before, so we won't have a baseline number to compare it to. In our programs, we've been small enough that we've been able to say, if you've never transited in this area before, we can't enroll you, because to qualify for the program, we have to have a sense of what your historical speed has been in the area. So that's a challenge. So going forward, we may not be able to have that level of specific information.
One thing also I'd like to comment on, when you have a Carl Moyer project, you replace a school bus or an ag tractor, the benefit occurs for many years out in the future. This cost effectiveness only applies to one ozone season. Yeah. So we won't realize that until we have a mechanism in place that can continue that year after year after year to actually be comparable to the benefits that we're getting from our on-the-ground local projects.
Thank you for that, Mary.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Director Mosby. It just kind of put things in perspective. You have 83.5 tons of nitrogen oxides reduced. What is the total amount that's being created in that channel?
A whole lot more. I mean, when you think about it, we are just still scratching at the surface of the number of transits that go through the region. So the number, 143 transits, I mean, this is not, there's many more transits that we're not reaching.
As I'm getting at is the ability to grow this is phenomenal, is what you're saying. So there's
yes, the ability to grow this is phenomenal. The challenge is going to be how we can build the recognition side of it, so the incentives can potentially become more recognition based.
Right.
That would. I mean, we're certainly growing it in that direction. This was I was very happy with this event. It was a good decision the whole partnership made to hold it near the ports, and we had tremendous interest from the ports, from the other shipping industry folks that are down there, and so it was definitely a leap ahead for us in that area. Plus, this bill in Congress is all about recognition. It's emphasizing that, and it's getting a lot of interest. So
as shipping companies replace engines and get cleaner engines, would this potentially down the road, though, not be quite as much of incentive, because the cleaner engines do a lot better job, do they not?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons we embarked on this program, was because eventually they will get cleaner engines, but it's a ways off. And the international rules that will require it only for when they replace engines, and a lot of shipping companies got started on something called a vessel keel laid date, so they met the deadline to not have to go to the cleaner engines. So the revisions, there have been some revisions in how much things are going to get cleaner over time, because those engines are coming in even later than we thought. So.
Thank you.
Director Richardson, did you get any indication from those representatives of those shipping lines of continuing the slowdown without incentives?
Well, that's a tough one, because this is right now an incentive program. I definitely felt that they were responsive to the request not to speed up in between. Mm-hmm. So that I can say for sure. And I can also say for sure that the incentive, even if it's a smaller one, and maybe getting smaller over time, provides a certain amount of assurance to them that we are attempting to cover some of their costs, because they do have increased costs from going slower. And it's a competitive industry where delivery of goods on time is one of their metrics. So I think we just have to work through that. But I think their willingness not to speed up in that area in between and what we saw is a very good sign.
We did hear at the last year's ceremony that was held at the Santa Barbara Zoo from one shipping company that said if there's some way we can incorporate recognition of the speed reduction program in the contracts that they sign for all of the products that are being moved up and down this area. For example, if Walmart had a contract for their distribution services that said, if you participate in this program, you earn more points as far as being awarded the grant for the shipping contract. That's something that we've been kicking around, haven't had success yet, and to figure out how to make it happen. But that would be a good way to get beyond the air districts or partnership of incentive funding.
Yeah, the customer side is very promising too. It's just very large.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion? None? Thank you. Thank you very much. Going to item 3.
Item 3, proposed amendments to Rule 360, emissions of oxides of nitrogen and from large water heaters and small boilers. 3A, hold a public hearing to receive testimony on the proposed amendments to Rule 360, emissions of oxides of nitrogen from large water heaters and small boilers, and the addendum to the final environmental impact report for the 2010 Clean Air Plan. 3B, approve a resolution which will result in the following actions. B1, adopt the California Environmental Quality Act findings that included determination that an addendum has been prepared pursuant to CEQA and the addendum together with the final environmental impact report for the 2010 Clean Air Plan has been reviewed and considered by the board prior to approval of this project. B2, adopt the general rule findings in support of the proposed rule pursuant to Health and Safety Code Section 40727 regarding necessity, authority, clarity, consistency, non-duplication, and reference, and 3B3, adopt the proposed amendments to Rule 360.
Okay. Open the hearing now or discussion first?
Staff presentation.
Okay.
Yeah, Tim Mitro, Air Quality Engineer with our Technology Environmental Assessment Division, will present on proposed amendments to District Rule 360. This rule was included in the board's action on August 17, 2017 to update the ozone plan rule implementation schedule. At that hearing, 3 rules were identified to reduce smog-forming NOx to assist in our region's efforts to attain the state's ozone standard. And each of those 3 rules were slated for board consideration in 2018. So this is the first one of that rule implementation schedule. I'll hand it over to Mr. Nitro for a presentation.
Thanks, Erin. So as I said, my name is Tim Mitro, Air Quality Engineer, and we're going to begin the board hearing for District Rule 360, which will be affecting boilers and large water heaters that are installed in Santa Barbara County. I'll begin with a quick preview of background on Rule 360 and then go into staff recommendations and answer any questions that you may have. So for some background, District Rule 360 was originally adopted by your board back in October of 2002, and this applies to small boilers and water heaters that are rated between 75,000 and 2 million BTU per hour. These are mainly units that are larger than what you find in your residential house, but still smaller than the industrial-sized units. So that's why we have an estimated of around 1,885 of these units in the county that are at various commercial entities such as restaurants, laundromats, office buildings, hotels, and so on. And most of these units are exempt from district permit requirements. So since most of these units are exempt from permit requirements, the rule is set up as a point of sale rule. And what this means is that the manufacturer has to go through the process to get it tested and certified prior to being able to sell it within the county. So most models are certified by the South Coast Air Quality Management District. They're the ones that initially started creating these sort of certification programs and made their amendments to their rule back in 2006. And so industry in the South Coast, AQMD, have had a long history of working together. And so where we're at right now is the South Coast has around 100 different manufacturers that have certified models where you can just look up the models on the website, see that certified to certain NOx emission limits, and then you can know that's all right to be sold within the county. Alternatively, the manufacturers can still certify their units through the Santa Barbara County APCD if they choose not to go through the South Coast AQMD program. So as Aaron mentioned, Rule 360 was listed as a control measure on the implementation schedule that was previously adopted by your board as part of the 2016 ozone plan to attain and maintain the state ozone standards. So during the process, Rule 360 was identified as a feasible measure to further control NOx emissions within the county. These NOx reductions are achievable because there have been advances in burner technologies since Rule 360 was initially adopted back in 2002. The main focus of the rule amendments is to reduce the NOx limits to 20 parts per million for newly installed natural gas-fired units. And the amendments are based off of similar requirements enacted by other districts such as the San Joaquin Valley, Ventura County, and the Bay Area. So effective January 1st, 2019, staff is proposing to lower the NOx emission limit for newly installed natural gas units from their existing certification level of 55 or 30 parts per million down to a new certification level of 20 parts per million. By having the effective date start next year, manufacturers and suppliers will have time to move any non-compliant units that are ready to be sold in Santa Barbara County to other areas that may not have as stringent of a rule. Staff is also proposing a few other changes to the rule to enhance the clarity and enforceability of it. For instance, staff is proposing to add a definition for modification or modify to prevent operators from circumventing the rule and using higher emitting equipment longer than anticipated. Staff is also proposing to add exemptions for unique equipment units, clarify that the district accepts the South Coast AQMD certifications, and clarify the Santa Barbara and clarify that the source test methods that are to be used if they go through the Santa Barbara County certification program. Since this is a point of sale rule, the proposed amendments do not require operators to immediately replace their equipment. Instead, as the boilers age and need to be replaced over time, the rule requires that the units be replaced with the newer, lower emitting units. The chart above identifies potential costs that the proposed amendments could impose on the purchasers of new equipment. The only new cost would be the incremental the only incremental cost of the burner, which ranges from $100 to $3,000, depending on the size of the unit. This incremental cost represents the price increase for purchasing a 20 parts per million unit, whereas all the other capital, installation, and maintenance costs are assumed to remain constant. Using these standard assumptions, the cost effectiveness of the project ranges from $2,800 per ton of NOx reduced all the way up to $11,300 per ton of NOx reduced. This cost effectiveness is within the range of previously adopted boiler prohibitory rules, and so Rule 360 is considered to be cost effective. On this slide, I've shown the key milestones in preparing the rule for adoption. In August 2007, the board approved the changes to the 2016 ozone plan, which had Rule 360 on it. So hence, staff got to work immediately and prepared the rule for adoption by releasing the draft rule and staff report to the public in October. A public notice was issued in the newspaper and distributed to everyone on the district's email list who subscribes for these rule notices. And the public notice was also mailed to all manufacturers on the South Coast AQMD certification list, local boiler and water heater supply stores, and to all permitted Santa Barbara County facilities that have boilers at their facility. So all of these entities were invited to participate in the public workshop, which was held at the district office on November 1st, 2017. We then had the Community Advisory Council in January in Buellton, where the CAC had a chance to discuss the proposed amendments, and that has led us up to today's board hearing in March. If the amendments are approved today, staff would make sure to send out an advisory to the affected community and businesses to make sure they are aware of the new rule limits. And as mentioned earlier, these new rule limits would be effective in January of 2019. So during the rule development process, various agencies, industry representatives, and the general public had a chance to weigh in on the proposed amendments. A summary of the key issues and findings are found on this page. The California Air Resources Board and the Environmental Protection Agency reviewed the rule and the staff reports, and the EPA requested some minor clarifications to be added to the staff reports. An industry representative also had a few comments that were submitted after the public workshop, and these comments and the responses to the comments are included in the staff report itself, and we did make a few changes to the rule in response to those comments. And then we got to the Community Advisory Council. The discussion focused more on education, outreach, and enforcement of the new standards. So as mentioned earlier, we would be sending out an advisory of the new limits if we're adopting them today, because part of this is just making the rule adopted, but making sure that people comply with it is another aspect. So we would have send out more advisories to make sure everyone knows about the upcoming rule limits, and then have our compliance staff perform checks at some of these stores after January 1st, 2019 to make sure that they have fully transitioned over. So ultimately, the CAC did take a vote and recommended that the district board adopt the amendments to District Rule 360 as proposed. So this concludes the overview of the proposed amendments to District Rule 360. At this time, I would like to restate the recommendations. Staff recommends that your board hold the public hearing and receive testimony on the proposed amendments to Rule 360 and the addendum to the final environmental impact report for the 2010 Clean Air Plan. Staff also recommends that your board adopt the resolution approving the amendments to Rule 360. Approval of the resolution will result in adoption of the CEQA findings, the Health and Safety Code General Rule findings, and the amendments to Rule 360. And if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them at this time.
I see no Director Mosby.
How many stores locally right now carry these low NOx water heaters?
So it depends on, like, if you're thinking of the ones at the very lowest end, like at the 75,000 BTU spot, you can still pick them up at your Orchard Supply and Hardware or Lowe's or Home Depot, because they'll still carry up to that point. Once you're starting to go to the more like commercial size entity or size boilers of the 1 million to 2 million, you're probably going to have to go through an actual plumbing supply company to get them installed. And so there are probably a dozen or so of local contractors that can, that each are familiar with their own types of boilers that that they put in, like A.O. Smith boilers or Bryan boilers and so forth. And so
does Home Depot carry any of the low NOx units currently?
Yes, they do.
Okay. And I just did some quick research to see, because I was curious as to why we went at 75,000 BTU. Why is that your cut in?
So a lot of the rules just kind of take precedence from how other air districts have set it up. And so the South Coast AQMD, they have the main certification program. They started it in the earlier days back in like the 1990s. And so they set it up from 75,000 to 2 million BTU hour because that is typically like the commercial size boilers. We also at the district have or cover the smaller water heaters, less than 75,000, under District Rule 352. So there's certification for smaller than 75,000, from the 75,000 to 2 million. It all depends on, it's just broken up because there's different technologies available at different times for certain different sized units.
So I was just looking at Home Depot's site real fast, and they have a 76,000 BTU.
Yes.
And it's a larger residential model. And being 1,000 BTU more and looking at the low NOx unit that they offer there is $2,400 versus the conventional is about $1,200 that they're selling now. So it seems to be a lot more. Now, granted, that one was a 100-gallon, the other was a 75-gallon. I didn't have time to pull all the numbers, but the numbers I'm showing and I'm reading here, it's a lot greater than the numbers you referenced there on the cost difference.
So what you may be looking at, because I also did the Home Depot search too, is different manufacturers.
That was Rheem on both models.
It was Rheem on both models? Okay.
And the reason why I'm getting at this is if you're sitting at that, it looks to me like potentially larger families that use the larger BTU water heaters are potentially going to be affected. And I think your numbers are skewed. And I think there's probably needs to be a little bit more out there for people like maybe in apartment complexes. Granted, it's looked at more commercial. But you're going to see people who potentially at the lower end who are going to be affected more with this, where families can get by with a 60,000 BTU heater are not going to be affected by this. And it looks to me it could be upwards of $1,000 more with this water heater for families that are larger families doing this just because there are 1,000 BTUs more.
So a lot of our cost data is based off of surveys that was done by both the South Coast AQMD, the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District, and the Bay Area. And so they did 3 independent surveys that was saying the incremental costs can range for, that $75,000 from $100 to $200 for, if it's just comparable, no any extra bells or whistles or added onto the boiler. Just the simple going from low NOx to ultra low NOx, just that $100 to $200 mark. So, yeah.
And like I say, if it's at 80,000 BTU, I think you would not be affecting as many people in the residential. And I think there's a level of fairness. If somebody can get by with a smaller 60,000 BTU heater, they're not going to be affected by this. If somebody has a larger family or larger household, it looks to me like they're going to be more than $100.
Yeah. So, just for reference, our 60,000 BTU units are certified to 15 parts per million. And so that's even a lower certification level of what we're setting for Rule 360 at the 20 parts per million.
And those are available right now, the 15 part per million?
For the smaller residential units, yes. Okay. And so that was during our 2011 adoption, we went through that process, and it was cost effective back then for the smaller residential units to get down to those ultra low NOx levels.
Maybe that's what, maybe they've got more of those on the market. That's why they're less priced than what Home Depot's maybe selling that as a high end right now, and hopefully that'll come down.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other, I see no other discussion. We open hearing now?
Yeah, this is part of the open hearing process. I don't know if we have any public comment slips.
No public comment.
No public comment.
Well, I think this is going to ultimately be a good resolution for lowering air pollution. I mean, residential units already have rules. It's good to extend it to these larger boilers. And when you feel it's time, Chair, I would approve the resolution.
Now,
move to approve the resolution.
Okay. Our second, do we take each individual 1, 2, and 3?
No.
All at one time? Okay. So I hear a first and a second to adopt the resolution. Roll call.
Director Williams?
Aye.
Hartman?
Aye.
Richardson?
Aye.
Mosby?
No.
Bennett?
Aye.
Clark?
Aye.
Murillo?
Aye.
Waterfield?
No.
Andrzejczyk?
Aye.
And Vice Chair Lizaldi?
Aye.
Motion passes 8-2.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Okay, moving on to item 10, announcements. Any announcements?
Nope.
Announcements, directors? Director Clark, do you have any announcement?
No.
Okay. Moving on to item 11, adjournment. Everybody approve? Meeting adjourned. Okay, second. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.